Thank you for listening to this episode. Make sure you come back for the next episode covering the points of this conversation.
And follow the podcast on social media by finding @Prestigious_Pod.
Follow me, Mr. Kent, at Mr. Chris R. Kent.
Follow me, Chris Bean, at Chris Bean Official.
Join our Discord for exclusive content and personal interactions.
And if you'd like to be coached on how to live a more prestigious life, you can reach out to me, Chris Bean, on one of my social media platforms, or by emailing the podcast directly at prestigiousInitiative@gmail.com.
Lastly, sign up for our newsletter either through social media or on our website.
This is the Prestigious Initiative. Welcome. I'm Chris Bean, and here with me is Chris Kent. Hello, Mr. Kent.
Hello, sir.
Today we have a guest whose journey from firefighter to authorship is nothing short of amazing. Join me in welcoming Sean Robinson to the show. Sean, it's great to have you here.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited to be here and to have this conversation.
Very good. So can you share a little bit about your backstory? What experiences, as an electrician to volunteer firefighter, and what really led you to where you are today?
Definitely. So, my parents were married quite young. I was about 20, they were 20 when I was born. I have two younger brothers. My dad, mechanic, he was also a volunteer firefighter. Just grow up in a very dominant masculine environment, with helping out in the garage, always being around, the different friends and coworkers and whatever. I grew up just having that image, and it surrounded everything. It was from how I was to maintain myself, or how I felt I was to maintain, to, toughen up, fix it yourself, like basically all of those things. And for a long time, the alcohol and drinking environment that I saw and was not a part of, in the sense that I was drinking when I was a child, but like, the games of, counting how many bottles or cans are going back for deposit, and mixing drinks and running to the cooler and being helpful, and just how acceptable that whole environment was. So, as I grew up and got more involved with taking a law and security program, working with young offenders, and then getting into working my own apprenticeship for electrical, my volunteer firefighting experience, all very dominant masculine, and a lot of the people I was around had the same sort of habits and routines with certain things, especially with drinking and partying and going out. And, I took basically an accepted view of that environment growing up through my own habits and routines and things, as I grew up.
Yeah. And I guess I haven't really thought about it, but really that kind of idea, or that those concepts are kind of almost nowadays seemed as fundamental to what it means to be a man. And if you don't do those things as a man, then you're kind of put out, and you're not accepted into the crowd.
Yeah, and then when I was 36, when I started to do some real life changes, and that's 36 years of the belief that I had to have those things, or I had to feel that certain way because I was a male, or because I was working in construction or firefighting or whatever it may be. It was like coming to the realization that I could change that at any point was just not something I thought about, right? It's not something that we think we naturally feel, that, I can control most of what's happening around me.
Yeah, and of course, starting so young, those are like the stories, the background processes that kind of drive your life forward, because those are the things that you think back to. Especially, you talked about your dad and your family, your childhood growing up. Those are the fundamental things that make up who you are as an adult. But it isn't until later on as adult that we understand that, hey, those are not necessarily what we have to do. I don't have to redo those things that my parents did. I don't have to treat everybody the same way. I don't have to go through those same habits and practices that they did. I can make my own. I can be something different. But it's hard to do that if what we're told, what we see when we're growing up is all of those things. It's hard to make that change so much later.
Yeah, definitely. Because going to the beer store, liquor store became, a routine. It was, we took the empties back, we got new stuff. It was for the weekend, and then it was rinse and repeat the next week. And whenever we'd go to functions and, camping or whatever, there was a process of packing those drinks and those things. So, using alcohol as my example and really the catalyst for change by removing it. Um, I just didn't know any different. So if we grow up using something like that as whatever's happening in our life, as we grow up and we do the same things all the time, we just don't think that it's different or that it can change. It's just like, this is just a normal thing people do.
Right. Now, in your book, Going Dry, My Path to Overcoming Habitual Drinking, you paint a vivid picture of your journey. And I'm kind of curious, what inspired you to document this transformation, and what impact do you hope it has on your readers?
Well, I basically had, I would think, a normal relationship with drinking and what that meant to me. But it got to a point where I was just at my worst. I was 320 pounds and I was just feeling awful, miserable, negative, that the real victim mindset. And as I got to about the end of 2020, COVID was what it was, but it made an already bad routine of drinking worse because we weren't going anywhere. We weren't, the liquor stores, everything, all that was available still. So it just made it worse because we were on these Zoom calls with friends and we're playing trivia games and drinking games and all these things. And you're in the comfort of your own home. So you're not driving anywhere. Even the fire department, they stopped doing training for a while because they didn't want to risk anybody going out when they didn't have to. So it just made an already bad routine worse. So as I got to the end of 2020 and I started to really think about feeling better, it just seemed easy that I would start by doing dry January, New Year's resolution to not have that in my life for a period of time, in an effort to start feeling better and be more healthy. And the things that I would learn as I opened up my mind to podcasts and books and really trying to set myself up differently than I had before by learning things that I wouldn't have reached out to. I wasn't the type, because no one around me was the type, to listen to self-help stuff or to read the books or, ask for help. So for so long, I felt I had to fix it myself, and I felt like I knew what I had to do, but I really didn't. That's what I told myself, because that's just what I had heard someone else say, right? We think we know what we have to do, but we really don't. So when I started to go through the process of dry January and February and learning about habits and structure, I kept a journal, something I never did, something I would have never opened up about because of the masculine groups I was around and what that might come back at me, what kind of hazing that might come back. It went from a place where I just beat myself up and vented, to a place where I could write my thoughts and feelings and what I was going through, what I was trying. And it was, towards the end of the year, because as I committed to a full year of not drinking, I started to learn about how useful this would have been to me when I got started, how useful this journal that I was keeping would have been if I had a version of that I could relate to when I was in that place of, not reaching out, not asking for help, not whatever. So I really finished that year kind of rethinking about how I was going to determine whether I felt that I could accept my vulnerability to share in a sense where someone that might be going through the same thing would be able to learn from what I went through.
All right. So I a couple different questions from there. I want to start with journaling. Journaling is seemingly a very, very helpful practice for you. I know I do journaling every day. In fact, I do twice a day, once in the morning, once in the evening time, but super, super helpful. And my question is, as you were going through this journaling process, did you have kind of prompts that you were going from? Did you open up with an empty page? Were you doing it on a tactile, like pen and paper? Or did you do it on digital?
I actually had a notebook. It's just a standard. It's actually right here. It was not in a strategy that I knew it was journaling. I was just feeling in that moment very heavy, and like I was burdening even my wife with the things that I was outletting, the things I was saying, the things I was feeling. And at first I just needed somewhere that I wouldn't have to listen to someone trying to fix it. I just needed to be able to get the thoughts and feelings out. And, and this is everything that journaling is, right? But in that moment, I didn't realize it. I just needed that outlet. And as I would grow with it, and as I would write more down and really become more positive with the things I was saying, because I could feel different about how I was, well, was starting to achieve certain things or feeling certain ways. Then the journaling really benefited me more, like I said, more positively. But the prompting, especially in the beginning, it just wasn't there. As I grew and I was learning about, the rules I'd set for myself and like how I wanted to show up, like, just not hide in my house. I wanted to still try and be out and about and, it involved with the same groups of people and such. The prompting kind of came from after an event. I would at least go through how I felt in that moment, or, like you said, in the morning, just kind of how that day might look for me. I'd kind of put some goals or outline some things in there, and it just developed as I grew with it.
Now, in your book, do you offer some areas for the readers to journal, or give them an opportunity to maybe think about some different questions that maybe they would answer as they were journaling?
I don't have, a workbook with it. It was very much entry level for me when I got started, and really from that place of my hardship, at its core, because the book that became really grew with me as I went through a lot of these changes. So, in the end of the book, I offer a lot of, not to give it away, but really for context, I give a challenge to the reader to start to implement some of the things that I went through in an effort to help them if they're going through anything. Because a lot of the 100-day stuff that I started to do, and keeping track on the calendar, and opening up to reading and listening to podcasts and books, and just a lot of those things really gave me the confidence and the information to start making some of these changes. And for that challenge to the reader towards the end, it's more to say this will work for anything. I was doing 4, 5, 6, 8 things at a time, using the 30 days, 100-day kind of cycle, and keeping track on the calendar, and it worked for things from brushing my teeth twice a day through to like keeping off alcohol or changing my diet.
Yeah, I think it's Jerry Seinfeld that references kind of the don't break the chain kind of habit, where you're making that X on the calendar. You don't want to have any open days, because that means you didn't complete that kind of challenge or task or whatever it was for the day. And having that visual kind of reference, you talked about the 30 days or the 100 days, being able to see that laid out, and you go for stretches at a time. You want to create that full X'd in, or the full checked out version of that, and not have any off days. And being able to visually see that, I think really is really key to being able to sustain and progress as you move forward with that.
It absolutely is. And one thing that I found with that is, if we make it too difficult, if we want to walk 10 kilometers a day, we're not going to do that. There's the rain's going to come, something's going to happen. We're not going to have enough time. So the thing I found to keep that success is to have basically a minimum that we have to achieve, and make it reasonable. Like if we want to do, 100 sit-ups or push-ups before bed every night, maybe we don't make 100 the goal. Let's just do 10, or let's just do 1, right? Have that. And then, you can see that X on the calendar. You've at least achieved it, because, our best isn't going to be the same every day, but at least you've made that effort to get down on that floor and do that 1 sit up or 10. You can do the 100 if you're feeling up to it. And maybe that X on the calendar has a big circle around it, because you exceeded what you were trying to do. It's just a matter of working with something that you can still see the consistency, see all those X's, and really challenge yourself.
That's really interesting you brought that up, because we were just speaking about that. In fact, yesterday we were talking about having a standard for whatever the practice is that you're doing, and you set your standard like, maybe I want to read for 2 minutes. 2 minutes isn't bad, but if I read for 2 minutes and I want to read more, then I can read more. But if I read for 10 minutes, then that I get the green mark. If I read for 15 or 30 minutes, and I get the blue mark or whatever, you get different, then you can kind of gamify it a little bit. You set the standard. What's the bare minimum that you have to do in order to say that I did this today? And then you do that. And some days the standard, the bare minimum is all you get, because that's all the effort, that's all the energy that you have to give. Some days you have more, so you go above and beyond those, and that's okay. Like you said, you just identify those a little bit differently. So I know that I stood out on that day, and that's proof to yourself that you know that you could do it. And then maybe over time you start to bump up that standard from 2 minutes to 10 minutes or whatever, whatever it works for you. But you understand, you negotiate with yourself. What is the bare minimum that I have to do to say that I did this today? And then, some days you have higher and lower and so on, but you have to understand that's a negotiation with yourself. And you, in order to say that I did this, you did the standard for today, you did the bare minimum, that's okay. That's all the energy you have. Some days are like that. And then being able to understand that and move forward with that, I think is a part to this equation, this self-improvement equation that people miss out on. They think if I don't read for 50 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, every day, I didn't read today, it doesn't count. Well, okay, well, what does that mean? You can't read for, that. It's not like you can't, some days you can't do that because life happens. Life is crazy. You never know what's going to happen next. And on top of that, you don't always have the energy to be able to put forth to that. So if you lower that down to a point that makes it acceptable that you can do that. I know James Clear talks about in his Atomic Habits, that going to the gym, standing on the treadmill, walking for 1 minute, that equates to him as going to the gym. Now, I don't know anybody in the right mind who's going to put the gym clothes on, show up to the gym, go on the treadmill, set 1 minute. Okay, great. Bye, guys. See you next time. That's if by just going through the door, doing the process. You're not going to read just one book, one page in a book. You're going to read more. So you set that standard to a minimum that is like almost comical. Like, yeah, I read one page. I might as well read another one. I got time. Whatever it is. So doing that, setting that standard, and then allowing yourself to be able to use that standard to create the practice, to create the habit of doing that day in and day out, so that it's something that you can sustain and move forward. I think that is the really the crux of this that lots of people miss, and so it's keen that you have that idea.
Yeah, and just a couple points there. And I really love how James Clear does that in his book, and even where he simplifies it, just as far as driving to the gym. Don't even go in the door; just get used to driving there, right? Because then it all works along that same path, where at least you get used to doing, even just setting your clothes out, right? You're just used to seeing them, and then you're like, oh, I might better put them on. So maybe you start to put them on, and then you get used to driving there, and then just walk in the door, and then as you kind of step up this thing, you get to the point where now you're doing a full hour workout, or you're doing whatever, because you got used to just the basics. And as I work through a lot of that myself, it was just like the sit-up example. I do 100 sit-ups every night before bed now, but it didn't start that way, right? It was just a matter of laying on the floor, laying on the the bench, and just doing one. And as I got to a point where I was just doing one, and now I'm doing 100 every night. If I want to do more, I can do more. But I timed myself, and I can do 100 sit-ups and 50 squats in 5 minutes. So when I've timed myself and I realized oh, that's 100, I gotta go. It's midnight. I'm just going to bed. I'm like, you know what? I have 5 minutes, right? So then I've taken that amount of workout that is now my minimum, and timed it or set it up in a way that I can think about it much simpler in a lot of the same fashion.
Yeah. And again, what a cool kind of mindset shift that you can do that with. Okay, man, I don't have time to do all these exercises. Okay, well, actually you do. It's 5 minutes. 5 minutes. You can take 5 minutes to do it. What a cool tip for that. Thank you for that.
And whatever that means to someone, right? If it's reading, if it's whatever, it's you time how long it takes you to read a page. And if you want to read more books, just figure that out, and you can break down, whatever that is. And if it takes you 2 minutes to read a page, then, you read 5 pages. Now you're up to 10 minutes, right? And, for that mark on the calendar, it is very impressive to look back at, we just turned over when we recorded this, we're just starting a new month. And, that I've got the calendar, it is absolutely full of stuff. And, I might feel like I didn't make any progress, but I look at the calendar and I've got, 100 sit-ups every day, and I've written that on there. I've got these squats. I just ran a half marathon on the weekend, and I've got all of these things on this calendar. And I can look back and be really proud of progress when I may not have felt it if I didn't have a visual, right?
Yeah, and I think and you're right on that too, because having that visual allows yourself to see your past successes. Because the way you think about the past things that you did is much different than sometimes what actually happened. Like it gets skewed in your way of thinking. But if you can see the consistency that you have built into your life, that I did this every day. Look at this. Or if you have, because it happens, I'm sure you have all these calendars are full, but there's that one day that stood out, and that one day you're like, oh, and that drives you, that motivates you to continue on, because you don't want that one day or whatever, the week or whatever it was, to happen again. And so that can sustain and fulfill that source of motivation as you move forward.
Yeah. And for so long, I thought, and the only way I was going to see progress is by doing, maximum reps, maximum minutes of whatever I was working on. And I held myself back for so long because just that elephant in the room was I can't get started unless I'm ready to go all out. And using that calendar again and using that sit up example, if I'm doing one sit up a day, it's 30 sit ups I would have never done. Or right up to now, I'm doing 100. It's like this April was 3,000 sit ups, right? And I think about it, as I joined it all together, and like I would have never done that if I thought I had to do 3,000 sit-ups this month, or I had to run that marathon, or whatever it is I'm doing. It's like, break it down into much smaller, do it every day, and then look back at it, and you've done a huge amount of work you would have never done. You don't have to do full max reps.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, as we get back to your book, I'm intrigued because it seems like you wrote a very very personal story as you're going through this book, and with the intention to help the readers walk in your path or a similar path as you did. Was there a sense of worry or even fearfulness as you were presenting that to be published or out in the open, the feedback that you were going to get from that?
There definitely was, especially, in the beginning when I wasn't talking about journaling. I didn't tell. My wife knew, but like people around me didn't know that I was committing to things a certain way, or that I was doing as much as I was with journaling and documenting and really coming out of that like tough masculine construction firefighting mindset that I was in into something more growth minded and progressive. Yeah, I just wasn't talking about it. And then in the end of that year, which was 2021, when I just started to really feel like this is a message I could put out, like it was a huge amount of anxiety and a huge amount of pressure on myself to just decide to be that open and that vulnerable to share. And it was really in a place, and it was almost timing listening to an Ed Milet podcast where he talks about how we're the most qualified to help who we used to be. And it really hit me in a point where I was like, you know what, like I said, I could have used this. So do I want to sit on this kind of experience and this kind of information in a way that I hold it for myself, or do I want to admit that I struggle the same as everybody else does, and maybe this version will help in some way to someone else that's like my former self going through some of these similar things. And I know that especially in the construction area where like we're not open and we're not talking, but like as I started to open and I started to share and posting the videos and all the stuff I'm doing still, having those people reach out to me and say, like, you don't know who's watching, you have to keep doing this, and asking me questions and looking for advice. And, some of these people that like are older than me and, seem more masculine and tougher than me. And, at least the visual, like asking for that information really tells me that like I am doing good things. People are getting good messages, and that, at least being out there and being vulnerable and sharing what I went through is doing what I wanted it to do almost the whole time.
Yeah, and firstly, awesome shout out to Ed Milet, wonderful podcast, like the awesome show, and for the ability to step past that threshold, and you're right, we are best educated, we're best adapt to motivating and instilling that confidence into the people who we used to be, absolutely, and especially if everybody has their own story to tell. And we think from time to time, or we're told that we are individuals, and that individual part means sometimes that I don't the path that I'm on isn't the same as somebody else's path. And so then you start to think, well, why I'm not going to do this because there's nobody else that's nobody else is doing this like I did it. So they're not going to be benefiting from that, where that's so far from the fact, because absolutely all of those things that you have went through and continue to strive forward in are so beneficial and so helpful and so impactful for those other people, because there's a whole group of people that are right on the edge of becoming the best versions of themselves. And all they need is a little bit of inspiration. And they get a little bit of inspiration from all over the place. And you might be that person that pushes them over, that helps them to commit to a better way of living. And that the thought of that is so impactful. And it seems like you're already there. You've had the people already reach out to you and tell you how helpful your words or your book has been to them.
Yeah, I have, and it really does, and that's how I found it too, right? Like when I started, and I couldn't talk to the people around me, or I felt I couldn't, about this realm of self-help and development. So where does one even get started? So, as I started to search on Google and look for things, like I found the School of Greatness, and I found a lot of the celebrities and people, actors and athletes that he had on the show, talking about their personal problems or personal lives and different challenges. And even though I'm not an athlete or an actor, I felt at least I could relate to who I thought these people were. And what that did was open up being interested in the Andrew Hubermans and the Caroline Leafs and all of the the doctors and the professionals that are putting out a lot more of the technical side of these things. And once I started to relate to some people, and then get a bit more of the information, well, then I opened this giant wormhole of information and help. And I have an hour commute to work each way, so like I'm not listening to music anymore. The odd day I need to rock out, but like I'm not, like I'm interested in the next book. I'm interested in the next podcast, and just really commuters university, I've heard it described, and just compounding as much as I can. And it would have never started if I didn't open up to some form of that content. And to kind of come back to where we were talking, if the little bit that I've experienced and can put out gets someone that motivated the same way to branch out to that next version, the way that I did. And we really have to pick apart the pieces that we can relate to, because like you said, we're all on our own path. Nobody's doing the same things, but we pick apart what works for us. I can't listen to, Brene Brown and get inspired by all of the feminine content and the audience that she speaks to, especially in her audiobooks. But there is a lot of great information there. Those are some of the best books I've listened to. And you just have to pick apart what you can use and what works for you from whatever you're involved with.
Yeah. So the way I think about that, anytime we intake new information, I try to link it with old information that I have rumbling around in my head. And from that connection is where the new creative opportunities lie, right? Like that new information linked with the old information that I already had sparks, and that connection that happens, that's where the creativity happens. So I'm always trying to look at new information, oftentimes in really kind of odd places. But what can I observe here? What did I learn here that I can apply to what I've already had? Or is this information that gets back cataloged until that new thing comes along, and then I can then the spark happens, right? That's how I think about the creative of process and moving forward as you do that. It's all that information. And right now we live in we can find information freely always, wherever we are. There's always valuable content, wherever it's on YouTube, on podcasts, so many different places. And I think, we talked about the stories that we have is when we're young. When we're young, we don't know any better. When we're young, we're lived in kind of like in a closed box. We can see the walls and everything that's inside. Only those things are inside. And those are the stories that we grow up with. Those are the stories that we're told, that we hold as facts. And it isn't until we get out on our own that we start to get just a string of new information. We pull that string. Oh, there's another one. And then, there's a whole tapestry of wild new information that completely changes your way of thinking. And when you do that, when you dive into that, then you can start to reinvent yourself. You see yourself not as somebody who lives by those old stories that you were told as a child, or the old stories that you grew up with, but rather you get to create your own story. You get to see the possibilities that happen based on your actions. You don't have to live today like you lived yesterday. Today's a new day, brand new, make a difference, make a change, and it's up to you. You get to decide that.
And that's a hard thing for us to come to terms with, right? Because we get so comfortable, and that's just what our brain does. We get so comfortable where we are, whether it's good or bad. Bad or toxic environments can be comfortable if it's what we're used to. And to think about removing ourselves from that, just like doing max reps at the gym, is a lot of pressure. So to do the same sort of thing where we're doing a bit at a time to pull ourselves one way or another is the same way we can start to change our environment. And I was in that place where I was just used to the life I had and used to the thoughts and feelings and the way I was used to showing up. And until I started to really realize that, I can do more about it, and that I'm responsible for it. We can blame our past or where we come from or what we were shown all we want, but at some point we become adults, and it's in our effort that we are responsible for it. We can continue on that path, or we can start to ask ourselves the questions, or start to really change what we think is true. And the only way we can do that is by doing something maybe we haven't done before.
Well, and speaking of things you haven't done before, I'm sure as you're living your sobriety, you have been put into interesting social contexts. And because of that I'm sure has created extra stress and pressure on either side of whatever is going on. Can you speak on what does that look like if somebody wanted to walk the same path that you're on? How do they navigate those social expectations as they move forward?
But yeah, there was a lot of challenges as I started to change through that environment. And a couple quick examples. My own brother, about a month or two in, was offering me a drink, and I turned it down. I didn't want a beer. So I would have something else. And then he's like, "Oh, you don't want a beer? Why? You don't have your coin yet?" And I wasn't in a program, but I was working through things on my own, and feeling that was the only way I had to do it, which is wrong. Never try to do this stuff on your own. There's many supports out there, but for him to say that to me was very hard for me to hear, because I didn't need that kind of negativity, and I was looking more supportive. And another example, I mentioned off air that I was in a wedding that year that I was trying to change this lifestyle, and a friend of mine was getting married. I was in his wedding. He was in my wedding, and we had a lot of drinks at my wedding, but now I'm in his, and he expects me to show up a certain way. And every single time we went to a function, a fitting, a bachelor party, or whatever, and I'm not drinking, his wedding was October, so it's about the 10th month of the year. He's like, "Yo, you better drink at my wedding. You better fucking drink at my wedding." And that was so hard on me, because that's how I was used to showing up before. That's the person that I was. I was the biggest cheerleader in the room for someone going through a celebration, and having the toasts and the cheers, and then just being the most involved with that. And a lot of the thing I would say is, first, I had to realize that nobody really cared what was in my cup, right? It was just, I cared. I felt like I had to be this person. I felt like I had to show up the same way. So when those comments came back, it was like I was letting myself down, or I was letting them down, because I was just supposed to be this person still. So realizing that I could have anything in that cup. It didn't have to be alcohol, or it didn't have to, mean that I showed up a certain way. I just had to show up, right? I just had to be there, and then, be there for these people. And the advice I would give is to just take it, one day at a time. A lot of the programs work that way, but, just have faith in yourself. And if you want to become something different, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you just have to stick with it. Some days you might feel more tempted than others, but what can you do differently? Rather than sit and just have that constantly on your mind, maybe go for a walk, or start to read a book, or if you're into video games, pull something up. It's just, if you change the thing you're thinking about, then you don't have that pressure anymore. And you just you just develop more confidence. As I went on and as time kind of passed, it was like I did create those new habits and those new routines and gain that confidence to kind of say like, okay, I don't need this right now. I'm gonna have a sparkling water or I'm gonna go for a walk. Like you just kind of create a new way to handle an environment you're so used to doing differently before.
Now, did as you're navigating those social expectations, did that give you insight on the type of people that you would like to associate with? And did that involve, a shuffling of the deck, so to say, in that regard?
It did. And I think that came from just naturally changing some of the people I was with. Um, and just to back up on that a bit, I felt in order to change, I was going to just all of a sudden lose all my friends. If I wasn't doing something a certain way, you're just going to lose all your friends. And I have to say, it doesn't happen as suddenly as that, right? It's not like I'm just not going to drink or I'm not going to do whatever anymore. And then poof, your friends are gone. Just like anything, when we all left high school, we kept close to some people, we grew apart from some people, and we probably grew apart from them again. And it's just a cycle as you change careers, as you change, spouses or whatever your situation is, you will grow further and you will grow closer to certain people. So as I wasn't interested in last calls at the bar anymore, I would start to grow away from certain people that were still maintaining the same lifestyle. Does that mean we're not friends? No, that just means that we're not is interested in the same things. I would learn that there was people that I had the best friendships with that was really only based on what we did while we were drinking. So, as I started to grow away from certain people, I started to grow closer to other people. As I started running and doing these events, I was more interested in that. So I was talking to, some people in that environment, and then I would find inspiration from things that they experienced or were going through, or ideas that they had, or as I started doing workshops and co-hosting events, I would start to pick up some stuff from the people I was with in those environments. And as we naturally grow in and out of these environments, and we change ourselves and grow closer to people that are more interested in what we are. Yeah, I found a lot more of inspiration and a lot more growth opportunity with just the people that I was around.
Yeah, I found that the people that you're around are either your biggest supporters or they are the biggest source of your downfall. Like they're pulling you back or they're pushing you up, right? And the hard part is either separating yourself from the people who are pulling you down, because that's tough, because oftentimes those friends are probably those friends or those relationships you've had the longest. Is my experience anyways. And because you've had those those friendships the longest, those relationships the longest, they've almost kind of morphed into, maybe they didn't start this way, but they've almost morphed into like a detrimental environment for you to be in. And with that, then you try to separate and you try to do less of this and more, less of the bad, more of the good. And as you are moving around, you're changing your friends. But the interesting part of all of this is you get to see the friends that you've had for so long in a different light. It changes your perspective. And as you start to move out of one phase into another phase of your life, whatever path you're on, but you start to see different qualities in those friendships, right? So like you may have, like you talked about running and doing events and stuff like that. You may have friends that already are doing those things, but you don't talk about those things with each other because that's not your main mode of conversation, right? You talk about whatever else is going on. But when you move from one phase into another, then you open yourself up and then you start to communicate those other new things with with the friends you already have. And now that relationship grows, that builds even stronger. And as you start to grow and move, then the other ones that are, kind of detrimental, the ones you probably had the longest, because that seems to be how it works, you move away from them. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not like you get at your phone, you swipe everybody to delete, and then you try to pull new people in. It doesn't necessarily work that way. You just start to see those relationships in different ways and new avenues to connect with those people that you already have.
Mm-hmm. And the one important thing to add too is none of that is in an effort to say the people that we're around just want us to stay where we are. And it's not to say anything about the kind of friends that we have, because I think we just all get comfortable, right? We all get used to what we're doing. And it's not to say that, we can't go do other things because, we have this toxic group around us. It's just not everybody is going to be ready to do, different things or different lifestyle changes the same time you are, right? So as I started to change, other people in my group were doing their own thing. I started to find people wanted to come with me. I started to find that people were asking more questions. And, you might find there's people that are trying to pull you back in. Some of that isn't always negative because they want to see you fail. It's just what they're used to, right? It's just, I'm just used to this person. I'm used to the way Sean shows up when he's around. And, we want to try and bring that back because, to see him being different or to see that change is, we just don't know what to do with that. We don't know how to communicate with that. And, as we start to grow and we grow naturally, hopefully we can bring some of these people with us, and hopefully we can inspire people around us to say, hey, like, I want to start doing that too. I want to start walking, and I don't feel like drinking Friday, Saturday, Sunday nights anymore. Like, maybe I'll just do it intermittently. Like, none of the things I'm working on are in any way to judge who I used to be or who I used to be around or what other people are doing. It's just what I can do differently, what I can do differently from who I used to be, and what I can do, for myself and for my family, and just changing from my core what that means to who I want to be versus where I was.
Well, you talked about inspiring others, and you do this in you share your journey on various platforms, podcasts. You're on this podcast. You talked about co-hosting events, doing different workshops. Where did that idea come from? How did that be created?
I think a lot of different ways, but the one that stands out the most is not everybody has that kind of time to listen to 2 hours a day or more of this kind of content, right? Of learning these different things and finishing these books. And I've changed habits with reading every night instead of looking at my phone, so I'm getting a lot of input from that. But 2 hours a day of podcasting and audiobooks, we just don't have that kind of time. I'd come home from work and be excited about something new I learned, or something that I wanted to try, or something that I was doing already and I just learned more about it, and maybe the science behind it or whatever. And I'd start to share that with my wife, and I'd be like, oh, you got to listen to this thing, or I'd buy her the audiobook or the book, and I'd be like, this is perfect. And nobody, she just doesn't have the time, right? We have 3 young kids and she works from home, so there's just a constant the hour one way and back that I had just isn't easily there for most people. So, as I've learned, and as really a lot of this is a form of therapy for me too, because, 21 years on the fire department, I was a trainer, and really just felt I kept more involved with what I was doing in that environment by teaching others. I can be more involved in this environment by taking that 2 hours, or taking the constant growth that I'm working on, and maybe putting it out there enough that someone can hear bits and pieces of it, and then maybe start their own journey and make their own intention to listening to the full hour or multiple hours of content, or reading those books. And it was kind of in that conversation with my wife where she's like, oh, it's in the queue. I'll try to get to it, to kind of put it out there in a way that maybe it condenses a lot of the different things in a a bit of a package, that instead of having all of the content I've been able to consume and learn from, it's in a much smaller, more achievable piece, as if I'm starting that, small habit again.
Well, okay, so you talk about habits, and habits are something, of course, that are huge as it relates to personal development. And as personal development and your continual growth, what type of habits or daily practices do you do that maintain and nurture that ongoing transformation?
Well, I guess first, there's a lot of pressure in having that perfect daily routine, right? We mentioned journaling. I know, we start to follow certain people, and this is actually quickly a tactic that I found useful is, changing the inputs, right? They'd say that, but if you're on social media, maybe don't follow the things that don't make you happy or don't make you feel like you're growing, right? You can start to change and follow people that are doing the things you want to do. But as I started to, as I started to, change these habits, it was Sorry, where were we going again? It was.
Yeah, sorry. So talking about habits on a personal development, includes, continuous growth. What habits or practices do you do to maintain and nurture that ongoing
Oh yeah.
transformation?
Sorry, yeah. So that morning routine to me, as I started to follow some of these new people, was a lot of pressure. It was all of a sudden, and with that commute, I'm up at 6 a.m. out the door, or like leaving by 6 a.m. So like that morning routine was like, okay, I gotta now get up and I gotta journal, I gotta have that smoothie, I gotta exercise, I gotta read something, I gotta, find time to shower, and then I gotta drive to work. Like it's a lot of pressure, right? To me, it was a lot of pressure with my schedule. So while my routine, I've had to make different things work with mine. I think everybody has to do the same. Don't see that morning routine or that process of what that looks like to anyone else and think that it's just automatically going to fit for you. You have to make that fit. So for me to make that fit in the morning, I do try and read. I try to get up, I try to read with a coffee, or I try to do some of the video content or stuff I post on my website. Try to get some of that in before I leave. A lot of the exercising, I try to go for a walk, but if I can't do it, I don't beat myself up about it because I try to do it later in the day. That morning routine is jammed packed as it is for some people. Let's try and spread that out across the whole day if you can't get it in, right? It's like not doing maximum reps at the gym. It's just doing something. So for me, some days it is everything I can do to fit whatever it is I'm working on right before bed. Like I said, it might be midnight and I'm doing those 100 sit-ups and 250 squats and, finishing that last big drink of water because I just didn't get it in. But, as far as my routine, it is doing those things. It's drinking more water. It's, I wasn't happy brushing my teeth, that I wasn't brushing my teeth enough. So it was one of the first things I tried that 100-day lifestyle cycle to mark the check mark in the morning and in the evening that I did it. And, after that 100 days, I just stopped tracking it to be like, I'm going to test this thing. And, I'd get in bed and be like, oh, I didn't do it. And I'd get out of bed to go and brush my teeth. And it was something that I just wasn't doing before. I'll do it in the morning. And it's like, just a few of the examples of stuff that I'm working on, but I'm definitely not stressing that it all has to happen before 6 a.m. It's great if we can get these things out of the way, because then you have your entire day. And there's a lot of science behind how that workout or whatever in the morning makes you feel for your day. But if you can't do it, just do it when you can.
And of course, especially on social media and those things, YouTube is a big portion of this, but we see those essential quote unquote morning routines. Oh, you got to do this in the morning. And we don't understand that those people, firstly, let's say maybe they hit that mark 10% of the time. Maybe it's more than that. Probably, hopefully it's more than that, but maybe that's their ideal morning routine, but they don't always hit that. And on top of that, even if they are hitting that every single day, which is kudos to them, good job. Even if they are hitting that every single day, they've structured that and designed that in such a way that it works best in their life. And we don't have their life. We have our own life. And so as we're trying to apply somebody else's morning routine to what we're doing, it is almost impossible to do 100% because we don't have that person's life. The key is to take, I like this idea, and I like this idea, and I like that idea. And how can I coordinate that with the other things that I already have going on and make that fit, allow those things to fit into my life so that I can try these things moving forward. Because I watched a lot of that content. Listening to and watching that stuff is I'm looking for key ideas and concepts to pull out to try them. Yep, that worked. No, that did not work. Can't fit that in. Let's not do that. And then you move on. You see what works, and then you make it fit in your life. So the people that are listening, don't take those morning routines that Jocko Willink or Andrew Huberman or whoever is doing as a gospel, and you have to do 100% or else, right? I don't know what the or else would be, but apply those concepts, try them, see how it fits and works for you. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, then move it on and do something else. You don't have to live somebody else's life. And I think sometimes that's the missing part. Like we try to live somebody else's life through those routines, and we can't do that.
Yeah, and we have to think about it as something we can work towards, right? Whatever we can create to make work for us. But the thing to realize is a lot of these routines are years in the making, right? These are perfected over years. And Alex Hormozy had a great quote, and he's someone like I really find a lot of influence from. But he said a lot of what we see is the plateau, and we need to emulate the rise, not the plateau. We need to see what was this person, what was Steve Jobs doing, or whoever doing, Jocko Willink, when they were working on the hard stuff. When they were in the middle of that rise, what did that look like? And I bet it didn't look like 3:59 in the morning posts of that hard workout. I bet it wasn't this perfected morning routine. What were they doing when they were just trying to figure it out? Use their influence now and what they're doing now as where we would like to see ourselves be. But let's try to focus more on what did that rise look like for them.
Well, Sean, hey, I got to tell you, thank you. Thank you for sharing your incredible journey with us today. Your story is a testament to the power and resilience that transformational impact can have. And as we are wrapping up here, I want to know, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think just thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate the conversation and the opportunity to be here. And I think I would just add that we're all going through the same or similar version of these things, right? And whatever it looks like to our individual situation, it's just give ourselves a chance and just keep showing up, keep trying. And I'll just say back to an Ed Milet thing that he said. It's he uses a pinata reference a lot, and I think about this in a lot of things I do. And you just keep swinging at that pinata, and you never know when it's going to break and all the stuff's going to come out, right? So what the next hit that you make in that workout or reading that book or in that diet might just be the one that breaks the pinata. Just keep going.
And if our listeners wanted to learn more about you, where could they go to do that?
Well, my website is seanrobinson.ca. I've got all my, a lot of my social stuff linked through there. My podcast appearances I showcase on there. I've got a blog post and weekly newsletter. It goes out Tuesdays. Really through my website, but I'm across most social platforms at Going Dry or Sean Robinson on LinkedIn. It's pretty well. Yeah, everything that comes through my website, there's a contact me section. I answer everything myself. So if anybody wants to reach out.
Very good. Yeah, I'll be sure to leave that in the show notes. Listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Pursue This Initiative podcast. Until next time, keep pursuing your path to greatness.